Ambassador Friedman, thank you so much for having us here at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. It feels so good to say that.
Yeah, it really does. Thanks, Eric.
It does, yeah. Great to be with you again. Well, you've been open here a few months in your new digs in Jerusalem. How's it going? How's the transition going here at the embassy?
Well, the transition's been great. I think it's 4 months to the day since we opened at that great ceremony that you were at.
Of course.
We are transitioning more and more every day. We're going to break ground in about a week and a half. That will probably double the office space here. But meanwhile, we have about 150 people already working here. We're processing visas and passports. We're having diplomatic operations here. I'm meeting people here. As you can see, I have a fully functioning office and staff.
There's a buzz here, Ambassador. There's people. There are people around. People. It's a busy place. It's buzzing with activity.
It's buzzing, and it's also become one of the great tourist spots in Jerusalem. You know, you can get out to the front without too much difficulty. People stop by and they see the plaque and they see the American seal, and a lot of people stop here. They take pictures, and more than that, you know, I've seen people praying here. I've seen people crying here. The emotions that you see here when people come visit are really moving. We have an embassy open in Jerusalem, and that's just something that I kind of thank God every day that we were able to accomplish this with the President's direction.
President Trump has said, okay, Jerusalem is now off the table when we're talking peace negotiations, a potential peace deal with the Palestinians. Jerusalem is off the table. This is the capital of Israel. The Palestinian refugee issue now is in some respects off the table as well, now that the Trump administration has cut funding to UNRWA, that UN arm dedicated to funding Palestinian refugees. Talk about the thinking behind that very important decision.
The laws that pertain to almost everybody in life are that you make your choices and you're held accountable for your choices. That rule, that kind of fundamental rule of physics, has not really been applied to the Palestinians over the last 50 or so years. You know, we give them money and they act in ways that are unhelpful, in some cases reprehensible, and certainly not conducive to making peace with the Israelis. I think Jared made this point in the New York Times that, you know, financial aid is not an entitlement, it's a privilege. And you have to be accountable for your actions. And the Palestinian conduct over the last, not under the Trump administration, but over the last 50 years, has not been of a nature that merits financial aid. It's really as simple as that. The United States is not giving out money to people that pay stipends to terrorists and their families. It's just untenable. And so I think from the perspective of everyone in the Trump administration, we see something that's not working. We find it difficult to justify the expenditure of funds from hard-working American taxpayers.
Taxpayer dollars.
We're not seeing the value there to the national interest, and so we're stopping it. It's not that there's a lack of desire to provide financial aid to the Palestinians under the right set of circumstances, but those circumstances just aren't there right now.
Yeah, it seems like in the past, under previous administrations, perhaps, Ambassador, there was severe pressure on Israel to make constant concessions and not much pressure on the Palestinian Authority. But it seems like now the U.S. has a more even-handed policy of also holding the Palestinians accountable.
I completely agree with you. I think the perspective that I've read that somehow the U.S. is punishing the Palestinians and bending over backwards towards Israel it's only an argument you can make by reference to historical flaws in the past. Sure. We're trying to bring things back to equilibrium. We're not trying to advantage any side, but what we're asking from both sides is you have to act in a manner that's conducive to peace and supports our own national interests before you get money. Now, the Israelis have been incredible friends. They've been incredible allies. They help keep our homeland safe. They provide great value to the American taxpayer. I don't think we can say that right now with regard to the Palestinians. We hope it changes.
And the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization mission in Washington, D.C., has also closed. Trump administration announced that. Very important move as well.
Sure. And that, apart from being the right policy decision, was one that we really had no choice because it was mandated by Congress. The PLO mission is only permitted to be open under circumstances that are prescribed by statute, one of which is that the Palestinians are not seeking to prosecute Israelis at the International Criminal Court. And last year at the UN General Assembly, Mahmoud Abbas got up and he spoke in perhaps the largest audience in the world and said, we're trying to prosecute Israelis at the International Criminal Court. Under those circumstances, how can you possibly keep the mission open? It makes a mockery of the laws of the United States.
You mentioned also those Palestinian Authority payments to the families of terrorists who have American blood on their hands as well. How does that continue to be an impediment to peace?
It may be the largest impediment to peace. I'll give you an example of where I found this really disturbing. This past year, there was a Palestinian man who was suicidal. His wife had left him with 5 children, couldn't support his family, and he was distraught. But he had, to the best of everyone's knowledge, no ideological views at all, no hostility to Israelis per se. What did he do? He went into a Jewish community and he killed 2 Israelis, in the course of which he was himself killed. Now, why did he do that? He did that because there was a law that will now provide his family with funding for life.
For life.
For life. Now, what a horrible, cynical, antisocial law that is. Yeah. And it just can't continue.
When I think of larger threats, not only to Israel, but to the United States, I'm thinking of Iran. President Trump pulled out of that disastrous nuclear deal. It seems like the pressure is being turned up on that Iranian regime as well by the Trump administration.
Yeah, the sanctions are growing. They're being implemented. And Ambassador Bolton recently spoke about how those sanctions are going to be increased even further. We're optimistic that those sanctions are going to take hold. And, even the Jerusalem decision itself, I think, sent a great message to our enemies around the world. That America will stand with its friends, that the president will do what he says he's going to do, regardless of what pressure may come from the EU or the United Nations. And so I think not only is the policy working, but I think the president, in contrast to some of his predecessors, has the type of credibility that presidents haven't had in the past to really, I think, strengthen the U.S. policy here.
Yeah, there's not just carrots, there's actually credible sticks. Yes. Being used by President Trump. I think of a former president, Ronald Reagan, who talked about peace through strength. Yes. It seems like the Trump administration has a similar tack on it. The U.S.-Israel relationship, you talked about it. I would argue it's never been stronger than it is right now. Can you talk about the cooperation? But also, and you mentioned this earlier, how the relationship benefits not only Israel, but the United States as well.
First of all, the commercial relationship is a lot more than people understand. Israel is one of the, I think it's number 2 in terms of public companies traded on NASDAQ. And on a more kind of fundamental basis, they help keep us safe because they have eyes on threats that threaten the United States in ways that very much help us. So without getting into specifics, there have been threats to the homeland, to the American homeland, that have been averted because of Israeli cooperation with the United States. That's very different than it was a generation ago. And so our national interests with regard to Israel have kind of morphed from being, we have similar values or almost identical values and beliefs to, in addition to all that, it's in our own, personal interests to make sure that Israel is strong because it helps us in kind of basic and important ways.
In arguably the most important region in the world in many ways. Ambassador, it feels like Israel is the first line of defense for the West, on the front lines, in the belly of the beast, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's also where we get so much value from Israel. Look, we have massive facilities in Asia, in Germany. Israel provides us with all this incredible support, intelligence, security cooperation, military cooperation, and we don't have any soldiers at risk in Israel. So the value to the United States is very significant. We get a lot for our money here.
You've just seemed to have struck up such a great relationship with evangelical leaders in the United States. Our founder and chairman, Pastor John Hagee, you guys have a special relationship. Talk about your experience in the evangelical community over these past few years in particular. It seems like a very special bond that you've developed.
Well, I have such great respect for the community. You know, Pastor Hagee has become a great friend. He brought down the house at the embassy opening. His closing benediction was truly stirring, one that I'll never forget. To live a good life, you identify 3, 4, 5 things that you believe in, that you're not flexible about, that you're not negotiable about, that you think are important and just and moral. And you live your life on the basis of, you know, a few foundational principles. And that's what the community does. And that's why I think we're so attracted to each other. I think we see the world the same way.
Well, I think you're going to show us around your new digs here at the embassy right now, so
Be happy to.
let's take a look.
Great.
Up next, Ambassador Friedman shares why one particular Bible story has deep meaning for his mission. And later, join us as we tour the grounds of the newly opened U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. You won't want to miss it. Don't move.